Good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Henry, and I serve as the Deputy Director of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods, and I would like to welcome everyone to our 5th public safety meeting with Mayor Scott and Acting Commissioner Worley. I'm excited that you are here today because you could have been anywhere, but you decided to be here with us. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few house rules. We ask that you stay respectful of the neighbors that are here tonight and are sharing their time in their interest of hearing from Mayor Scott and Acting Commissioner Worley. We also ask that you take this time to silence all cell phones and limit side conversations so that we can hear the mayor, commissioner, and any questions from the audience. The agenda is very simple tonight. Mayor Scott will offer some brief remarks and introduce Commissioner Worley. Commissioner Worley will introduce himself, and then we will open up the floor to some questions. We are asking that you line up 5 at a time tonight and ask one question to the commissioner or to Mayor Scott, and there is a 2-minute limit so that we have enough time to hear from everyone tonight. I do see some familiar faces in the audience, so we ask that if you do have questions, please try to wait until new members of the audience have an opportunity to ask questions. We do have restrooms located off the auditorium, so please exit through the doors and follow the signs in the hallway. If you haven't already, please take the opportunity later on tonight to engage in Community Row. We do have a few important agencies here that have some resources and very important information, so we ask that you take time to do that. If you haven't already, we do have a pre-event survey that you can complete, and we also have a post-event survey where you have the opportunity to ask additional questions to the mayor or the commissioner. Last but not least, if you are unable to ask your question tonight, we do have a staff member here that will be able to take concerns from you, and we will introduce him later on tonight. I will now pass on the mic to the president of the National Federation of the Blind, Mr. Mark Riccobono.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you all for coming to our home, the national headquarters of the National Federation of the Blind, for this evening's event. We are not a safety and a public safety organization by trade, but we take very seriously our role as a community partner. The National Federation of the Blind is America's civil rights membership organization of blind people, and we know that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day we work to raise expectations for blind people because we recognize that low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. In 1978, we bought this entire city square block here in Baltimore and made this our national headquarters. It didn't look like it does today. We believe that we helped provide an anchor to this part of South Baltimore, and since 1978, we have been putting millions of dollars into this building and to creating jobs here in Baltimore. We have held in this building dozens of meetings on a yearly basis, not just people from Baltimore, but all over the country, and in fact, all over the world. And so we take very seriously our role as a community partner. If you're here this evening or tuning in online or elsewhere, we want you to know that if you know a blind person, if you are a blind person, if you're someone who is experiencing changing vision, we are here for you, and we would invite you to join our organization and be part of the work that we do. In closing, I really appreciate the mayor and commissioner being here to have this public forum. As a membership organization of blind people, we take very seriously the idea of being about the people. And public discourse like this is really important, and we're really proud that we can be a partner in opening up our home to all of you for this forum. So I thank you all for coming, participating actively, and if we can ever partner with you in any way, please call on us. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you again to you all for hosting us here and for the great work that you do, not just here in Baltimore, but of course across the country. Good evening, and everyone, and thank you for joining us here tonight. As you heard already, this is our 5th community engagement session with Acting Police Commissioner Worley, our 3rd in person. I want to thank every single Baltimorean that came out here tonight. That shows, again, your commitment to having a better and safer Baltimore. Also want to thank Councilman Costello for joining us. Councilman Costello has been at the last 2 of these, and actually he's now the only elected official not named Brandon Scott to come to more than one. So thank you, Mr. Councilman, for your dedication to the city. We're about halfway through the schedule of these community events. 7 engagement sessions held both in person and virtually for some folks who can't come. So we have another one in person next week and a telephone town hall leading up to the commissioner's hearing on the 21st. And I really wanted to highlight this is about hearing from you all and about you learning about Acting Commissioner Worley and what his vision is for the police department. Again, as you heard, we're going to have a microphone. We want folks to come up, take your one question so we can get to as many people as possible because this is really about hearing from you and hearing from the police commissioner and to a lesser extent from me. But most importantly tonight, I just think I want us all to know that we are here to work together to move Baltimore City forward, because making Baltimore safer is going to be on all of us getting involved, all of us working together to push for a new way forward and engaging in each other in ways that we haven't had before. I always start these off by, as I do many things, talking about where we are and our most pressing issue in the city, and that's, of course, violent crime in the city. As of the start of this meeting, homicides are down 23% in Baltimore, and non-fatal shootings are down 9.7%, 10% for me, Commissioner. We round up, and we're in my math. And violent crime, of course, is down overall. And I always start those numbers, take those numbers to show where we are, but also to say that while we have that progress, we all know there is so much more that needs to be made across the city of Baltimore. And that's why we are doing the work of working not just with our police department, not just with the women and men that work with the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement in every city agency, but community partners throughout the city to co-produce public safety in Baltimore, because we know that those acts of violence have many causes, many effects, and many different individuals and parts of our community can help us build a safer Baltimore. So thank you again, everybody, and I will turn it over to Commissioner Worley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to our hosts. Thank you mostly to you for coming out and let me hear from you this evening. I was born and raised in Baltimore. I grew up in Pigtown, not very far from here. I lived in Brooklyn for about 12 years. I've been with the department for 25 years. I actually started out in a patrol car in the Western District in 1999, moved up through the ranks and hopefully will be the next police commissioner. I've been around, I've seen what works, what doesn't work. I can tell you one thing that did not work, that really hurt us with the community, was zero tolerance. It never worked, it alienated the community, and we're still trying to build that trust back. There are 4 things that I want to accomplish. I could talk about everything probably all night, but the main things are enhancing community policing, which is something that we have to do. We haven't come far enough along in the consent decree process with that. And of course, fully implementing the consent decree and come out of the consent decree before I'm finished here. Improving our staffing. We're over 500 officers down. That's not an excuse, because our men and women are still doing more with less. Those reductions that the mayor mentioned have come with 500 less officers. So the officers out there are working extremely hard. And then also just basically continue that crime reduction. Community policing is something I was doing in the Northeast in 2013 with a community letter, and I connected with the community. That's my strong point. That's what I plan on doing as the commissioner. And as we move forward, I want to hear from you. I'm not going to take up a whole lot of time. So thank you again, and I look forward to your questions.
All right. Who's first?
Good afternoon. How are you, Mr. Mayor and
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Interim Commissioner?
Good afternoon.
My name is Dolly Truesdale, and I have a couple of things I'd like to ask you. One of the things that I constantly hear you say, if you see something, say something. step up, man up. If it was one of your relatives who was caught in a crossfire or injured, I often hear you say, you want somebody to tell. But when it comes to safe streets, you say, oh, they're in the community. Their credibility will be compromised. So how do you tell citizens who pay for safe streets with tax dollars, how do you say they can't tell, but you should tell? I talk to my neighbors, and they say often, if I tell, my life is in danger. But when we listen to the news, we hear that some of the Safe Street workers live in Owens Mills, and the interim police commissioner lives in Anne Arundel County. So how can the citizens step up or man up?
So a couple of things to that, ma'am. I think that what you have to understand, one, I'll let the commissioner talk about that. He lived in the city most of his life. He got married and his wife told him he had to move, but he'll be moving back very shortly into the city. But when you hear me talk about folks needing to step up, I think there's a little bit of a difference there, right? So I'll just say this quite bluntly, and we've had this happen before. I don't care who you are if you work for me. If you're a Safe Streets, if you're a police officer, if you're a DPW worker, Rec and Parks worker, if we catch you doing the wrong thing, you're going to jail. And the record states that, right? Police officers obviously have been sent to jail. Safe Streets workers have been sent to jail. DPW, Rec and Parks employees have been sent to jail. Doesn't matter where you are, who you are. You could work for President Joseph Biden. If you're in Baltimore and you do something wrong and we catch you, you're going to jail. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, there's a difference in how those things are depicted in the public. And when you talk about the work that our Safe Streets violence intervention workers do, the same, as I said to someone at one of the previous ones, the same respect that we give to undercover police officers, we would never ask an undercover police officer to come out and say, hey, yeah, you're undercover. Tell us what you learned when you're undercover. We would never do that. We would never do that. We have to offer those men and women who are putting their lives on the line with no vest, with no gun, the same way. But when and if they get caught doing things the wrong way, they'll be held accountable just like anyone else.
And I can answer your question about living in Anne Arundel County. When I got married in 2015, I lived in Brooklyn with my mom, and my son lived with me. My wife lived in Annapolis by herself, so I moved to Annapolis. We started looking to come back to the city. She got a job with a different company that gives her a stipend for her proximity to DC. That's why we stayed there. We started looking about a year ago, and then interest rates skyrocketed. So we've been taking our time to look before we find the right place in the city. But we are coming back.
Hi, I'm Ellen Worthing, and I am from Locust Point. First of all, Brandon, good job on the homicide reduction. Excellent, that's good. Now, as far as, I don't know what your title is, Mr. Worley, soon-to-be Commissioner Worley. We have gone through a lot here in Baltimore City regarding the corruption in the Baltimore City Police Department. I'm not going to go through it all. I mean, you should know it. You, having been with the Baltimore Police Department, as far as I'm concerned, are part of the problem. Because if you're going to stand there and watch as police officers commit crimes, you're not a good person. So, what I want to know is what you're going to do after all this with the consent decree that we fought so hard. How are we going to keep up the momentum and pick out these police officers that are corrupt?
Well, first, you assume that I stood by and watched crime getting committed by officers. I never saw a crime get committed by an officer. So I was never part of any of the corruption. I was never part of any investigation with internal affairs in reference to corruption. My internal affairs record is clean. Secondly, we have started this in the process. 2 years ago, we had 40 officers leave the department either through termination or resignation through termination. Already this year, we've got 13. So we are weeding out the bad officers. It just takes us time. We have more complaints internally now than we are getting externally. which means our officers are reporting other officers who are doing wrongdoing. Once you start getting that, that's when you'll get rid of corruption. And you're right, I have lived through some pretty bad things. And it gives us a bad look throughout the nation. And that's what I want to continue to work towards to change so we become the best police department in the country.
Shorty.
She said I get 2 minutes, right?
And Shorty, your cord is dangling behind you. Don't fall.
I ain't gonna fall. I'm too close to the ground. All right. Now we're talking about the dissent decree, all right? As a private citizen, I sent Judge Bedard my interpretation of the dissent decree and what's going on with the dissent decree. In our first meeting about 2 weeks ago, y'all said that if you're gonna answer this letter. So I gave you the letter and I put it in the book. Everything I've been doing with the Baltimore City Police Department and the politicians since 2006. Y'all said, get Shorty, pull your mask up. Well, we're getting ready to unmask Baltimore. You feel me? So I'm gonna hand you this information in front of everybody so we don't have no misunderstandings. Because what you do in the dark always comes to the light. Remember that. So that's my spiel. We're not doing questions.
Yes, sir.
Here you are.
Thank you, Shorty. Boom.
Next meeting, I get it back. That cost me.
Do you want to make a copy of it? Okay.
Y'all got paper. Y'all know how to make a copy of shit, right?
You know you pay for the copies too, right?
I ain't paying for nothing. I'm giving it
Okay.
You want to pay for it, give me $50.
Okay, sir. Boom.
We all we got.
We all we need.
My question is that Safe Streets has been here and many other remedies have been in Baltimore. I'm gonna go with, let's just say 7 to 8 years. You personally know that I went to the left and went and got over 1,000 men, which was 300 gangsters, and we never got a phone call or anything to clean the blood up. What we trying to ask is, how many more people gotta die before we get to sit down with you, that we have been here, that if somebody from California and all over the world can call us all over the world to put work in, even outside this country, why isn't Baltimore working with Davon Antonio Nevadone, who was once America's most wanted for a murder that I didn't do? I came home in '97 as the resurrection of the ex-offender, and I'm terribly here to say to everybody in here, y'all don't want a good ex-offender to redeem himself. Because again, as I said to you, I had 1,000 men that were some of your most dangerous men, as well as in legislation from City Hall to Annapolis, and my phone still got crickets, and I've been through 3 dudes, and I want him to know, and you have to let him know who my men is, because I lost 1,500 in the riots because of his men. So I don't have a lot of time. I just want everybody in this room that if you want to get some things done, especially the men, link with me when you get out of here so we can get on this ground and clean this blood up, because this is a Doug and Pony show. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Boom. I'm gonna ask you, Mark. Raise your hand. Can you make sure you get with that brother right there, and we make sure we can connect you up.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sean Weston. That's SEANWESTON. First, I want to thank the Federation of the Blind for giving this meeting this evening. My granddaughter, she's a survivor of bilateral retinoblastoma, something that has really took my family by surprise.
Yes, sir.
You know, it's something that we never experienced. And I have been really enlightened on what this disease and this thing caused. But I'm here today because I want to speak for the community. But when I look around, you know, I really don't see the community here. You know, I really don't see a representation of Baltimore. But the people that is coming here to this podium to ask the questions, they continue to ask the same question. And they continue to have the same complaint. And it seems to be corruption. Corruption. Corruption seems to be destroying our city, our country. I'm a victim of corruption. I've been dealing with this. I spoke with you at the last town hall meeting. I came today. Hopefully we'll be able to speak off camera. So
Yes,
I'm
sir.
not going to go into full detail about this. But we as a people here in the city, it's on us. It's not on them. It's us. When they not doing their job that they supposed to be doing, we supposed to march to that ballot box and change them. We continue to make the same complaints about corruption, and nobody seemed to be doing anything about it. So we have to look at ourselves and decide, okay, when are we going to change leadership here? Okay? I plan to speak to you, Mayor, so hopefully we'll be able to talk after this meeting.
Yes, sir. And I know where you're at.
Good evening. I'm Rob McMahon from the Sedonia area. First of all, Mr. Mayor, I would like to thank you for the Gardenville Rec Center that is coming to Hazelwood Avenue. And a big problem we have in our community is loitering. Do you have a program to engage with the loiterers similar to what you had to the Squeegee Initiative? Maybe to work with them and find things to help them and things for them to do?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm excited about the rec center too. You know that neighborhood is one that's very important to me. I lived in it until a month ago. But I'll say anywhere, and we'll get that specific. That young lady that you're talking to is a perfect person. Get the specific locations, because it doesn't matter where young people are gathering like that in the city. We'll use the same exact strategy that we do with the Squeegee Collaborative to try to get those young people engaged. I know one location is Jimmy D's, which of course I myself go up there and talk to those young men who, and well, you know the area, so you know that a lot of them actually live in Baltimore County, not in Baltimore City, because it literally sits on the city-county line. But we'll continue to engage them there and anywhere else in Sedonia if you know other places outside of that particular location. Actually, Shorty saw me up there one day. Remember we had that incident up there? Thank you, sir, for that question. You did. We pulled up at the same time.
Hello, my name is Terrell Cobbs. Mr. Scott, one of the things I wanted to know, as far as the Safe Street thing, in the 217 area code, reason why I'm saying about that area code, I got shot in the area code with AK-47
Yes,
like
sir.
15
Sorry for
years
that.
ago. But of course, I was doing things I wasn't supposed to be doing. But I want to know why Safe Street is funded so much money and nothing is going on in that area code. I recently went through there earlier today. It's a trillion times worse than it was when I was there. Of course, like the guy right there was saying, it is on the people. It is on us. But you are a person, we all in front of it. We all are the people. So why are we getting together to go to a Ravens game and an Orioles game, all nationalities, with no problem, but we can't come together to fix this city? I find that I definitely have a problem with that. And as far as everybody here laughing at, life is a wonderful experience. It's a wonderful experience. But the playtime is over. There's no need for smiles. Because if your child was on there, on the ground, would you be smiling?
Yeah, so listen, I agree with you. I think that people can say many things about me, but they know that I will do exactly what you're talking about, right? Like being out there working with the brothers that are out there doing the stuff. WeRS, whoever, everybody knows I ran 300-man march for many, many years. Being out in the street is not something that I'm afraid to do. There are many, many individuals that we've been working with who do that, and we continue to put a lot of funding. And to be quite honest, I'm getting criticized every day for putting $50 million out into the community for community groups to stand up and apply for grants through MONSE to do the work of reducing violence. Now, what I'll say about Safe Streets again is that when folks hear Safe Streets, especially now that someone has made them into be the boogeyman, right? That Safe Streets zones are very small, right? They're very small, and when you look at the data that we didn't do this analysis, we have external people, it's been proven to work. Now, nothing's perfect. They don't work in a larger part of the city, but also when you think about the Safe Streets budget in the grand scheme of a $4 billion budget, even since the commissioner is sitting next to me, in the grand scheme of what BPD's budget is, doesn't compare. And I think that what we have to do is understand that the conditions that exist in 21217 and 21215 and many other places in the city, they're much bigger than one organization and their responsibility. But what we have to continue to do is invest. And when you look at the investments that we're starting to do, not just in the infrastructure, but the organizations outside of city government that are trying to do that work and building the things in neighborhoods that have been ignored on purpose. Let's be honest, that's the reality. These neighborhoods for decades and generations didn't have any funding going to them on purpose. It's going to take time for us to reverse that, and that's the work that we've begun. But we can definitely follow up with you about specifics, or if you have specific people and organizations that you think are doing great work that you want to highlight to us.
And can I say one more thing? I promise you, it's not going to take long.
You got a long line behind you, brother. Yeah, just when it's over. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mayor
Good evening,
Scott,
man. Good evening.
Commissioner Worley.
Good evening, ma'am.
My name is Diane Christopher. I live in the northeast area of Baltimore, and for the last 2.5 weeks since we had the storm, our lights have been out on our street, has been one block. When you come home at night, it is pitch black. We residents and I are petrified that we have to get out of our cars in this when it's extremely dark. I called BG&E last Friday. They said, Ms. Christopher, your lights will be fixed, your street lights will be fixed within 72 hours. After the 72-hour deadline, nothing happened. So I called again yesterday. They said, ma'am, I'm sorry, but your lights will not be fixed until October the 13th. I said, that's just outrageous. So I was so upset that I called your office and I spoke to a representative, Mayor Scott, in your office. And I said,
Do you know the person's name? You don't have to. It's
and
fine.
I don't want to say it in public.
Yes, ma'am.
But anyway, a tower light was put near my house so that we could have some light, some temporary light. So I said, neighbors are complaining they would like to have a light similar to the one that's near my house down the street from me. So a representative from your office said, Ms. Christopher, call 311, make the request. I called 311. They said, that doesn't come from us. You would have to go call your Northeast Police Department to get a temporary light. So I'm confused. I've just been given the runaround, and the tower light that I'm speaking of is Magnum A generic company.
No, we know and it's a
And
gentleman.
so what do I do?
So, Ms. Christopher, a couple of things. One, can you tell me what block? Don't give me your address. Just the block that you live on.
1300 block of Limit Avenue.
Oh, okay. I know exactly where you are.
And
so
we're-
there's a gentleman
Sure.
standing back there in a white shirt who just happens to be your new district captain. He can talk to you about that, and we'll follow up directly with BGE about the order and why they think it's going to take until October for your lights to get back on to see how we can help you and your neighbors.
Thank you, because there've been a carjacking since that happened.
Yes, ma'am.
And we're very upset. So,
Absolutely.
But thank you for having this meeting, and thank you also, Commissioner Worley.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, ma'am.
My name is Joan Floyd, and I'm looking for some clarification on something that you said 2 meetings ago. I brought up the fact that something needs to be done about Commissioner Harrison's signing of a memorandum of understanding with Johns Hopkins University that actually allows the university to take over some of Baltimore Police Department's patrolling responsibilities on some of our city streets. And you stated that the Baltimore Police Department is powerless to do anything about the Johns Hopkins University Police. That's a private police department. So my question for you tonight is, will you please explain what that statement was based on, what you're basing that statement on? Is it perhaps based on some document that we've not seen? And please tell us, in your view, who does have power to do something about Johns Hopkins University private police. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blair. I think that for those who may not know, Johns Hopkins joined Morgan State, Coppin State, University of Maryland, University of Baltimore in having their own police force, as many colleges do. This was an act of the Maryland General Assembly where they passed legislation, and then there had to be a MOU on how they would operate with the police commissioner and Johns Hopkins. There is a board of folks that they have to have that are going to be doing the oversight. And I think, Joan, what I want you to understand is that let's just say in a realm of a world where Commissioner Worley or Commissioner Harrison, since he signed it, decided that he wasn't going to do A, B, C, X, Y, and Z. You're talking about something that was passed by state law, right? You can't disobey those kind of things without ramifications. But as I said to you, and I'll say again, Hopkins police force has to follow every single rule of the consent decree and everything that's happening in Baltimore per their MOU. Thank you. Ma'am?
And they are not taking over those areas. They're going to work with us. That's still Baltimore Police Department jurisdiction for us to patrol. They're just going to have extra officers.
Good evening. My name is Charlene, and I'm a Baltimore transplant for the past 33 years total. I lived in Westport, and now living in Frankfurt. So I cover pretty much most of Baltimore City and have developed friends and some connections. The things that have been concerning me with this police department overall since my lived experience is the inequity policing and the issues with morale within your police department. To include, like recently, when you have the situation with women that was working in your police department and they brought up a lawsuit of sorts around sexual harassment. So you have a serious issue there. So my question to you is, why should we feel confident, why should I feel confident and everybody else that you'll be the person to do the things that need to be done outside of consent decree? What's in you to inspire those individuals that work under you to be correct and engage in community policing beyond sitting in the cars and driving around? Thank you.
No, thank you, ma'am. Basically because since I've been an officer through my whole career, I've done the right thing because it is the right thing. I don't know if you were in the Northeast when I was the major and got the newsletter, and I basically kept the community informed on everything that happened. If we did something wrong, I told them we did something wrong and we fixed it. I told you about when we had crime, I gave you tips. And also I've come through the ranks, so I know what every one of my officers are going through. Commissioner Harrison was a great commissioner. The one thing that he couldn't do was come from within the BPD. I've held every seat that the men and women under me hold, sergeant, lieutenant, all the way up, and I've excelled at every one, and I've done it the right way, and I have never cut corners. My men and women know that my biggest thing is the little things, the little tiny things that just answering a call. And one of the best things that several years ago, and this tells you as an officer, one of my sergeants told me, I was complaining about a call. And my sergeant told me, he's like, officer, he goes, if you approach every call like this, you'll be a successful police officer and you'll do things right. If that person calls 911 and they're asking for your help, that's the most important thing in that person's life at that time. Treat it as such and you'll be a good police officer. And in the academy, my advisor told us the one thing you needed to be a good police officer is integrity. And that's what I have. And I'm going to push that forward. Over the consent decree, over the last 4 years, we've weeded out a lot of the bad officers. And we have a good department. We're going to continue to move forward. I'm not going to bring in a whole lot of outsiders because we have the people, probably no outsiders. We have the people within the department to continue the plan that Commissioner Harrison started.
And ma'am, just to address one thing about the equity in policing, as you live in Frankfurt, Baltimore's largest neighborhood, and my now former neighborhood. I'm just above you now. But you know, if you lived in Northeast, that we have been policing in an inequitable way from patrol since basically 1959. And we just went through this police redistricting process that is something that I started, quite frankly, when I first got on the city council, to make sure that we are now policing based off in this case now 2023 data and not 1959 data, so that everybody based off population, calls for service, all of those violent crime, nonviolent crime, that these things that would be even across the board, so that, for example, your neighborhood, our neighborhood wasn't the largest and had the fewest amount of folks working from BPD in that neighborhood.
When I got to the Northeast, you had one car responsible for all of Frankfurt. When we changed the 10-hour shifts, we changed the post boundaries, and you got two. And now it's even better because we did away with some of the other areas the Northeast was covering. So now they have the same amount of officers to cover much less area, so it's more equitable throughout the city with our calls for service.
Good evening, Mayor, and good
evening.
evening, Commissioner.
Good evening, ma'am.
My name is Laurie. I live in Morrill Park. I've lived there for 35-plus years. We have many people from Morrill Park also here tonight who have some concerns specifically related to open-air drug markets. Our community park is overrun with people using daily in the park. The Royal Farm Store and Dunkin' Donuts alley is covered with open drug use, selling of drugs, crime. I believe, and I think most of the people that I'm here with tonight believe, that one of the primary elements that's impacting our community is the prostitution. The prostitution brings the Johns in who feed the prostitutes with money. And then the prostitutes then go get their drugs because they're on drugs. And so you've got this vicious cycle that keeps running in our neighborhood. It attributes to all of the trash and garbage. So my question to you is, I think that if we started to get the prostitutes off the streets, specifically arrest them, get them into the help that they need, I think that you could reduce some of the things that are impacting our neighborhood, because these people don't actually live in our neighborhood. They're here because they're providing a service that people are coming from outside into our neighborhood to get. So I would like to know from you, when can Morrill Park expect to see your police officers start engaging with arresting the prostitutes that are openly and daily providing services in our neighborhood, doing drugs in our neighborhood, and just really impacting the neighborhood terribly?
As far as the sex workers is concerned, we're working with the state's attorney's office, because what happened in the past is we just continued to arrest the sex workers, and it really wasn't doing anything. So we're going to try to work a strategy of diversion where we can, without arresting them, get them the services that they need. But a lot of the issues, I know right where you're talking about on Washington Boulevard, because that used to be my post, my sector that I was the sergeant of. And right back there standing up is your new major, that's Major Hood, because you just became part of the Southern just recently. But addressing the low-level drug offenses, we've made multiple handgun arrests. As you know, right there along Washington Boulevard and Griffiths, there was a lot of violence. And we started, I can only tell you that we've been working on it, and we will continue to work on it, not only just with us, but we have partners that are working along the same areas. So we're trying to calm that area, but we also know about the Dunkin' Donuts and the Royal Farms. And he can help you with some of the things, give you some of the things that we're doing. But a lot of our drug arrests are coming from those areas, and because the supply and demand is very high. And it has changed a great deal from when I was there in 2008.
It wasn't always like that in my neighborhood, and it really, really upsets us because we feel like we've been left behind. And I would really appreciate it if you all could help us. So thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Now, Major Hood is right back there. He'll meet you right over here.
Evening, Mayor Scott and Commissioner Worley.
Good evening, sir.
My name is David Kramer, and I'm a lifelong resident of the city. I also represent Showing Up for Racial Justice, SURGE, and we're part of the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs. And we're working on facial recognition technology right now. And as you know, it was totally banned up until the end of last year. and there is legislation in the making to put guardrails around it. Want to know your stand on facial recognition technology and the importance of guardrails, both as a city issue, but also if it comes up in the state legislature, whether you would support that.
So that the policy question is really a question for me. So you know that my office has been working with Councilman Burnett around said legislation, and what we always say, and I'll say to you what I said to the councilman, is that I know some of the issues that facial recognition has had, especially with African Americans, and he knows that, and that's why he's going to be working to put those guardrails on to make sure that any legislation that passes locally has that understanding. And when and if it comes up at the state, I know that myself and others will be there to make sure that the General Assembly hears those same things, that we cannot repeat the same mistakes of the past and allowing a new technology to be used, quote unquote, for good, with all the bad things that come for it, because it's informed by some folks who have some bad thoughts about people that look like me. And I know, and the councilman's been working, he's been working very diligently on that.
Yes, sir, there's got to be safeguards. We have to approach facial recognition just like we do DNA. It's got to be almost a certainty, as little room for error as possible. And our lab actually is kind of working with that now, with all the different pixels and points. It's a lot more technical than I ever could explain, but you have to have the safeguards so that it's not used to basically target or hold someone accountable for a crime that they didn't commit.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello again.
Hello.
I find it astonishing that Mayor Scott would cede his authority and allow a man who quit before his contract was up to pick his successor. And speaking of ceding authority, in previous meetings that I've brought up police brutality, and you've yet to answer my question about what you were planning on doing about it. In fact, you seem to be a master of deflection and claim dealing with police brutality is someone else's responsibility, pointing to internal affairs, the state's attorneys, and now the Attorney General. I'll bring it up again, that while you were in charge of the Northeast District, you had several awful repeat violent offenders on the force. They were under your command, and there was no way you weren't aware of their terrorizing the community, especially in 2013. You claim to have been in charge of 140 officers in the Northeast District, and you refuse to address the so-called bad cops working right under your nose. What makes the two of you so confident that Worley is the appropriate person for the commissioner position when he couldn't even command nor properly reprimand a couple of dozen bad officers out of 140? How can he be expected to lead the entire BPD when he couldn't handle one district?
Well, thank you, ma'am, and I'll just say again, first, no one made this decision to appoint Commissioner Worley but me, and that's the truth. And more importantly, I think that we've had this discussion about this case for many, many years, and I'll say again, and I'll say this again very bluntly, if you, yourself, and many others advocated for a law change, that the Attorney General leads these kind of investigations, and if the Attorney General comes back to us, as we have many times since I've become mayor, and says that anybody involved in any police misconduct, this case or otherwise, did something wrong, we will do what we have done and follow the appropriate action, period. There's nothing else to say about it.
And I'll answer the same way I've answered the last two times you've asked the question. Okay, well, you said I never answered the question, but I've answered it every time you asked it. You just don't like the answer. So what happens is the incident you're talking about in 2013 occurred. Internal Affairs handles the case because it was an allegation against officers, and the state's attorney found that the officers didn't do anything wrong. Internal Affairs also found that they didn't do anything wrong. As a district commander, I do not oversee internal affairs. So I had no right or even look at that file. As the commissioner, I do. So if something like that happens now, I will look at it. But as a district commander, the officers that work under you, I can't watch what 140 officers do every single day. And that's why we have a separate internal affairs process where you make a complaint And when the complaint is followed up, if the officers do something wrong, they are held accountable. I just told you we fired or officers left 40 officers 2 years ago. This year, already 13 have left in either termination or in lieu of termination.
You can come on.
Hi, good evening. My name is Gretchen. I live in Bel Air Edison. I'm a social worker in Baltimore. I work in Baltimore City Schools. And Acting Commissioner Worley, I wanted to ask you for some clarification on some comments you had made at another community meeting around the role of mental health and social workers when it comes to crisis response. Because I believe very much that there should be a much stronger role for social workers to play. Social workers who are well-trained, because we want to make sure the equity piece is happening. And I know the comments that you made were around social workers not wanting to do that kind of work, not being able to find social workers to do that. And I wanted to first challenge that because I have done that kind of work. I've worked on mobile crisis teams. And I also know that all this summer long, other school social workers worked at the curfew centers till 3 o'clock in the morning. And I believe that when you train people well, when you pay people well, we'll do the work. And so I wanted to hear your commitment, what you think about strengthening that role of social workers to respond to mental health so that police can step back and respond to other things.
Well, Gretchen, that's really a question for me and not for the commissioner. So we have one of the largest 911 diversion things running in the country, and we're going to be looking to expand that. We're working with our federal partners to expand that. Actually, Allie, raise your hand. If you see this young lady over here, she leads that work. Gretchen, you guys might know each other from previous work, and I think about that. But we're looking to continue to expand that, and I'll just say this and say it quite bluntly. For far too long, we put too much on BPD. It's not their responsibility. And as I said last week, earlier this week and last week, in the city that has the mental health and health systems that we have, if any city can do it, we can do it. And we're going to continue to grow that. We're happy to be a national leader, but we know in the way that our country responds to these things, that doesn't mean that we're perfect by any stance. And thank you and thank everyone else who helped out this summer at the curfew centers, because that was a way for us to, again, show that we want to remove BPD from things that, quite frankly, they shouldn't be doing anyway, and have folks who are highly trained. And we look forward to working with you and anybody else to expand that work, because we want to take more calls to service and have them diverted immediately away to other folks. And we've been working very diligently on that. And I would love to have you connect with Allie to see if you can to help us with that.
And I would love to have you, one of you, social worker, ride with every one of our officers, because you can handle it better than officers. We've had to train our officers to handle it simply because they handle it and they run into it. Part of the problem is if you run into someone that's violent, the social worker is not armed, so that's when you need the officer. But I would love you to partner with every single officer, every car we have, every night, so that you can handle those more appropriately than we can.
And I'll just say from my experience working on mobile crisis that I did it for a year, but I did not have any situations where the officer that I was with ever had to use a weapon or anything.
That's good.
So, I mean, I know that sometimes can happen, but I also think that that's a stereotype we have around mental illness that isn't always true.
Right.
Thank you.
And part of it was probably because you were with them, that you were able to de-escalate some situations that they may not have been able to if you had not been there.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Hillary, and I've lived in Northeast Baltimore and raised my family there for the past 29 years. I'm also a social worker. I've been listening at the last couple of community meetings, taking notes and thinking about some of the things I've heard. And as someone who works with children, I know that we tell children in school that it is good to interrupt bullying and that bystanders should speak up. The police ask community members to report crimes or snitch and report anything that they observe or are aware of. This is difficult when our communities really don't trust that it will be handled safely and well. Many feel they should not snitch. It's up to adults or those in leadership positions to model the behavior we want to see in children and in our communities, I think. When you are a major in Northeast District, and I know people have talked about this before, there were a number of incidents that occurred that can clearly be identified as police misconduct. And I heard what you said before about that. You said that you were aware of these, and specifically at some point you were at the scene of different incidents after they happened. You've also said that it was not up to you to respond, and you've talked about IAD in the state's attorney's office as being responsible for following through. Yet those of us in the community know that nothing happened to stop it at that time. If children in our schools who are bystanders aren't brave enough to speak up, if citizens don't report crimes or misbehavior, we know that bullying and misbehavior continues. Did you speak up when you were in Northeast District at that time when you heard that things were going on? Moving forward, my question for you is, how do we know that you will be brave enough to call out abuse and brutality? How do we know that you will be brave enough to police your own officers or be a whistleblower, even if IAD and the state's attorney's office doesn't act?
Well, basically what happens, I get the case. So as the police commissioner, I get the case. So I'll have input in the case once I read the investigation. Now, I don't remember 4, I do remember 2 distinctly, and one of them, the officer went to jail for 20 years. The other one where Tyrone West, the officers did not go to jail. I don't remember the other 2, but the other one, he went to federal prison. He's in federal prison for what he did. And that's what I want to do. We're going to hold our officers accountable. I've been a part of when it was really bad. And we've changed the department over the last 4 or 5 years under Commissioner Harrison, and I've been in a role of a colonel or higher doing that. I was the only one that stayed at that rank when Commissioner Harrison got here, and I've been pushing forward for these reforms and going along with the consent decree because it's the right thing to do. I didn't like zero tolerance. I hated it. We alienated the community. I don't like bad police officers. One bad police officer is one too many. And we have to get rid of the bad police officers. And we have a process in place now. We have a police accountability board that oversees what our officers do, even outside of PIB, our internal affairs. They are all civilians. We have an accountability bureau that looks at the low-level offenses and makes sure that the punishment is correct for the low-level offenses. So it's completely changed over the last 5 years the way internal affairs handles investigations with more input. Plus we have civilian members on police trial boards who make a ruling. They have just as much authority as the officer, sergeant, or supervisor that's on that trial board. So we are involving the citizens to help us police our own department.
And then, ma'am, I just will add too, I think, to get another part of what you were saying, Commissioner Harrison and myself and some other members of our delegation in Annapolis have been trying over the past few years. So in many states, we'll just use examples. Let's just say if Sergeant Jenkins from the now infamous GTF, right, or VSIS as the commissioner and I would call it, when that incident was brought to light, when he was brought to light, we had to legally keep him on as a police officer through the entirety of all of that. Because by law, Maryland state law, he can't be removed, even though we've been trying to get that changed to allow our police commissioner to have the power that many chiefs around the country have, that if that happens immediately, they can be removed, and if they are found not guilty, then they can come back to work, right? But while they are under that kind of suspicion of something so heinous, they shouldn't have to be paid for but to sit around by you all. And we're hoping that yourself and many others will go to Annapolis again with us this year to fight for that kind of change because it's needed. I figured you did, but yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Commissioner
Good evening,
Worley.
sir.
First, I want to start off to say I think you are a good pick for police commissioner, someone coming from inside. I've been in Baltimore about probably just under 20 years. I've raised my son here, graduated from Patterson, so I'm pretty vested in the city here. I have 3 quick things to bring up, and I really appreciate your input, Mr. Mayor, as always, but I really want to hear from the commissioner this time. One, grime breeds crime. And there's a recent report that shows the particular zip code in the Northeast is the dirtiest zip code in the country. I can tell you instances like right now where there's a park that over in Bel Air Edison that extends all the way from, let's say, Lake Montebello, all the way down to the Moravia near the McDonald's down there. There's a large park there that at the bottom end, it looks like Beirut. At the top end, it's clean, green, beautiful. And one of the issues is I don't see law enforcement doing their job when people are loitering, trash. That brings down our property value. So that's something that directly relates to the police position here. And I want to state the other two really quick. I thought you gave me 2 minutes. Zoning. Okay. Oh, sorry. I guess that was it. That was all I was allowed for my 2 minutes.
Okay.
That was it.
And I can get you also with the captain from the Northeast, but what happens, we work better probably than ever now with all the other city agencies. Mayor Scott has made it clear that policing is not just for the police. You have to police our community. You have to get rid of the crime, get rid of the grime. We have our officers call 311 and report these things for DOT or DGS to come out and clean it up. Now, the loitering is a little bit different because the loitering laws are very, very particular. We got in trouble, and part of the reason we're under the consent decree is because we violated those laws years ago for loitering. There are certain things that have to take place in order to even address the loitering, because you can stand and hang out. But there's easier things to do. You can get out of the car and stand next to someone and talk to them. Usually when the cop gets out and starts talking to you, they're going to walk away, or you walk foot. So they don't want to talk to us when we're standing out there. So those are some of the things that we can do, just walking foot. And then we can call those things into 311 that the trash needs to picked up here. And get that bottom area as clean. I know exactly where you're talking about. Get that bottom area as clean as the top area.
I'll just say, sir, that I may or may not have been riding my bike in Lower Heron Run Park recently, and a lot of agencies got a not so nice message from me that I'm not going to have what we had down there last summer.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And who would like to talk to? I guess I have
He's right there.
He's right behind you.
Right behind you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Matt Urso. I live in the South Baltimore neighborhood. Thank you for being here. I understand the challenges you deal with because I volunteered with the city police for about 9 years. I was active with the auxiliary police unit.
Do you want to come back?
Well, that's part of the question. Obviously, with down 500 patrol officers, you're not going to have officers complaining that they're taking their overtime, things like that. There's a huge opportunity. Brandon was supportive. Eric was supportive. Just my request that you consider having a robust, large auxiliary unit to supplement, because there are some neighborhoods. Federal Hill was one that it was very well received. The community associations bought bicycles and things. There's ways that it could be utilized with the shortage of officers.
No, I'm not only considering, I want it. We only have 15 right now. So that's one of the three things that I want to build up is first our Explorer program, which basically doesn't exist anymore for the 14 to 20-year-olds. Continue to build on our cadet program and our auxiliary, because you guys can provide services that keeps our officers in place with parades and just different things. So if you can talk to, I'm trying to see who's back there that we can talk. Here, Mark Taylor just stood up. He can help you out and get your information. And please recruit more people, because the more we get, the better we are.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Beth Hawks, and I have a business in Fells Point, and I live in Pigtown, but my heart is in Federal Hill. I want to thank you, Mayor Scott, for nominating Commissioner Worley. He is a wonderful man. He was born and bred in Baltimore, in West Baltimore. He knows this city from every part of the city. I just really, really, really hope that he gets the assignment. I think he's fantastic. I participate in the Southern District meetings. I've been going since Bealefield was the major. I am one of a handful of people that show up every month. And when you participate with your officers, you get things done. I want to thank you right now for the Dirt Bike Task Force. My guys over here know my issue with the dirt bikes. We are waterboarded in Pigtown between 8 and 20 hours a day. It is a nightmare. It has been fantastic. I came to a couple of the squeegee collaboration meetings. I was not a believer. I'm a believer now, and I thank you. I really appreciate your vision for the city. I think you're working really hard, and whatever I can do to help you both, I'm here for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Beth.
Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
So, Worley, you've said several times that you didn't have the power to oversee police misconduct in your previous positions. But any citizen, any police officer can report misconduct when they see it. So you've been a BCPD officer for 25 years and in a position of leadership for more than half of that, including during the Gun Trace Task Force well-documented reign of terror. So my question for you is, have you ever in your life reported, raised a red flag about the behavior of another officer?
Absolutely. I've done it multiple times, as a matter of fact. We have a system, a blue team system, where you can put our officers in, and then I've also written up some of our commanders for not doing what they were supposed to do when I was a chief of patrol and assistant chief of patrol. The only way I can ask people to be accountable is to hold them accountable and to lead by example. So that, I mean, yes, I've written up multiple officers. The use of force policy, anytime policy is done with use of force now, that's handled by our special investigation response team. That doesn't come to the district commander. What happens, we call them, they come out and do an investigation, and then they decide the charges with the Police Accountability Board, our ACC, and with our what's it called? I forget what it's called, but our charging committee. They decide what charges. It's completely separate because they don't want people, like, they don't want the commander having as much input, because most of your commanders are going to are basically help your officers. They want to talk to your officers, and you work for that particular commander. So they want that separate, so it's a completely independent investigation. And then anytime someone dies from a police action, it goes to the Attorney General. So not only is the Attorney General investigating it, we investigate it as well, and then the state's attorney investigates. But I can't count the number of people that I've put in blue team or written up on administrative reports for failure to do their job.
And I think it's important. And I think it's important for everyone in attendance to know too about the evolution of these things too, about the importance of. We always talk about checks and balance and basics in government, but the checks and balances in this. This is not how BPD operated back in the day, and now over the past few years, we've gone from the department that the Department of Justice said was the worst, right, to the one that they send people to model these policies, use of force, mayors, police commissioners, police chiefs from other places. And no, we're not perfect, but when you think about where we were and where we are today, there's been significant progress, and we just got to keep pushing to make sure that we're making more of it.
So on Tuesday, Tawanda Jones said Officer Friendly is dead. Officer Friendly has...
Ma'am, can you not be disrespectful to this young lady who's been waiting patiently? We know you waited for your question. We already answered your question. Okay, we'll just, ma'am, we've answered like 4 or 5 of your questions. You're supposed to get one. Don't be disrespectful to the people behind you. Thank you. We'll ask the other people. We will answer the other questions. Now this is the last time I'm going to tell you before you're being disrespectful. We'll have you removed. Can you please allow the other folks to answer their questions? Somebody please remove her from the meeting, please. I'm only giving her one, shorty. She's being disrespectful. There's other folks that are waiting, ma'am. You ask multiple questions. We answered the question. We're gonna move on and let other people answer the question. Just let her sit down. That's cool. She's good, ma'am. Ma'am.
Thanks very much. My name is Kelly Quinn. I'm a resident here in Riverside, third generation living in my house, still has Formstone on it. I am also with the Choice Program at UMBC.
Yes,
We're a mentoring program, a diversion program. We offer workforce development and educational advocacy for young people. And it's with them in mind tonight that I'm interested in how are you including youth's voice to determine how best to address public safety? How are we ensuring that communities are safe from a young person's perspective?
Yeah, I'll start and turn to the commissioner. So this is something that's important, very important to me personally, and I know the commissioner has specific things for young people. Everything that we do from a public safety standpoint, whether it's from MONSE, whether it's even with other agencies like the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, the Mayor's Office of African American Male Engagement, Recreation and Parks, we all center with youth voice. So I'll give you a clear example. We know at the beginning of the summer, everyone was up in arms about the teenagers and what the teenagers are going to be doing, and they're going to be running all over the city. We actually went to them and we sat down with hundreds of young people and said, okay, we want to talk about how you all want to have a safe summer. What can we co-produce together to create that? And that's where we came up with the Be More This Summer initiative and all of those things that you saw for those young people. The same thing with the Squeegee Collaborative and all the operations that we're doing with young people and opportunity youth, right? This wasn't a bunch of adults in the room deciding how we were going to do Squeegee, and then the same thing with curfew. We had the most impacted people as a part of that, right? So when folks say, as we just heard from Beth, the improvements, even though we know we still have many more young people to get connected so that them and their families can be better and they don't have to be out there, right? It's because they were bought in because they helped produce that. They were the ones at the table with us to say, this is how we think this should be approached. We can't and we won't, as long as I'm here, go back to the days where a bunch of adults are going to always decide what's best for the kids. The same thing with the work that MONSE is doing inside of our schools. It's talking to the young people themselves about what's happening in the things and how these things are coming about and how we can work together to resolve those issues. And we would love to, I know Mark is still here, would love to tag with your organization to talk to those young people, because we're going to be having, and Dr. Terraza, Deputy Mayor Dr. Terraza is leading this youth violence work for us, because just for a point for everyone in the room, we have to now by law have a comprehensive violence reduction strategy every 2 years produced, and that is by law led by the health department. She started that work. She's going to finish it before we pass it off to our incoming health commissioner, but we love to tie in any organization with that.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things, I had already mentioned it, the Explorer program doesn't really exist anymore. At one point, we had 15 Explorers in the Northeast District. That's for ages 14 to 20. And then he can transition right to cadet at 18 and right to police officer. But we need to start it even before then. We need to get into the elementary schools and start talking to the kids. We have Police Commissioners Basketball League. I want the officers to get out of the car more and walk and talk and just interact with the children, because we're at a little bit of a disadvantage because the school police are in the schools, but there's nothing that can't say we can't go in and teach the DARE program, bring back the officer-friendly program, something that connects us with the younger children. Because we used to do something, I did it when I was in the Northeast. There was a reading program where I went in once a month and read to a young man. So it was reading partners. So I want to get our officers back into doing that, because that's the way you connect with them. Because you connect with them in school, they see you out on the street, they know who you are, and you've already built that relationship. So we've got to start in the elementary school so that we get to them before they get to be 12 or 13.
And I'll just add, the commissioner just reminded me of this too. It's something that we're trying to bring back. We actually had a program where we trained over 500-600 officers throughout the department in partnership with Baltimore City Community Mediation Center, called the Youth Dialogue Training, where we would bring officers from a district and young people from that same area together. Erica would lead the trainings each and every day, and we saw a lot of good things. And there's some really cool stories that came out of those, and we're looking forward to bringing those things back too.
Good afternoon, Mayor,
Yes,
Commissioner.
sir.
Good
My name
afternoon,
is
sir.
Ronald. First of all, I just wanted to commend you, Mayor, on your squeegee initiative. I think you're at least attempting to do great things with that, and it's definitely appreciated. The reason I'm speaking today is just to speak a little bit more about your dirt bike task force. I think that it's possible that we may need a little more education, a little more training for those officers on that particular task force. I've watched those officers, unfortunately, bump these kids off of their bikes with their patrol cars. I myself was a victim. The other day, we had a visual, not on a dirt bike, but licensed motorcycle driver, where they wanted them to disperse quickly. It wasn't all dirt bikes, and they began to spray mace in the air. So I just don't think, while bikes and cars are driving, I just don't think that is the way to handle that. So just respectfully asking if we could possibly get some more training and maybe even some programs for those young guys and for those riders. Is there a plan in the future for the dirt bike riders for them to be able to maybe ride somewhere or have something in place for them to be able to move forward?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll start there. Actually, we've been partnering and we've been investing in, there's actually an organization in the city called B360 that takes young people off the streets riding and shows them the STEM side of having to build a bike, work on the bike, all the things on the bike, and how to ride dirt bikes safely in places that they're supposed to. They had a summer camp that actually went and rode a dirt bike with them for the first time a few weeks ago. Not my thing. I'll leave the bike riding up to other people. But one of the things that they are working on, and we're looking to support them, and actually I know a U.S. Senator is also looking to support them on, is how to get them a place where they can actually go and ride, right? Where we have them at right now, we had them at Bocheck Rec Center, one that I reopened after it had been closed for 20 years, and in Bocheck Park, and they really loved it. You can see it. B360 is the organization, and we're looking forward to helping them and helping to find that location so that we can have them do something that, quite frankly, is a part of Baltimore's culture and isn't going anywhere, and do it in a safe way. I'll let the commissioner talk about the training and the accountability measures that he wants to take.
Yes, we can get them more training. Bumping the bikes is not within policy. And if you see that, you need to report that to us, because that's not part of how we engage the dirt bikes. For the most part, we rely a lot on the helicopter to follow them, and we try to do different initiatives where we find the dirt bikes without them even riding on them, so that we can confiscate them. So, and we don't chase dirt bikes. We're not supposed to chase dirt bikes. The idea is to get the helicopter over top of them. Once the helicopter's over top of them, it's very difficult to lose them. And then we can go, once they stop, we can make the arrest or confiscate the dirt bike. But nowhere in policy is it for them to bump a dirt bike and knock anyone off the bike.
Thank you, Commissioner. And
Yes,
also
sir.
The Mason as well, too. So, again, just respectfully requesting some additional training for that.
Yes, sir.
Task force. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And Mayor, respectfully, if I could have 30 seconds of your time after this, appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
My name is Wendy White, and I'm here to speak on behalf of my mother, as well as several other mothers that are victims of gunshot victims, homicides. My mother has now lost both sons within the last 19 months, literally the same way. Fleet Street, July the 3rd, 33-year-old was my baby brother. The question that's being presented is, upon information for these families, what is the procedure for them to be addressed or made aware or even acknowledged to what has happened? Because right now, she's still fighting about the 33-year-old who was murdered, her son, on the 3900 block of Elmora Avenue, November 1st, 2021, to now be met with her 33-year-old son murdered on Fleet Street, 2023, and yet nobody has said anything, given her any directions, given these mothers resources. They're being met with phone calls that they can't contact the people back, or attitude when they're just asking, I was left a message, how do I respond to this? And constantly they're looking at the news, and the repetitive deaths is repeating their situations. She's been here all evening and she's going through the motions, looking at the two of you and other folks in this room, and she's on the phone calling me because she couldn't stand here and speak herself, because her pain is real and reminded to her every time she turned on the TV. So what is the resources to help them directly?
So I'll address the resources. So we definitely, I know Mark is still here. Mark, raise your hand. So we have resources for your family. Let me first say to your entire family, I'm sorry for your loss of both of your brothers. We have resources that we can refer to for both Monty and VPD victim services to get people any kind of support and help that they need. And I'll just leave that part of that. So, and we can talk about that on the side. And the commissioner will directly address what folks that are doing the investigation should and will be doing after he talks to you.
Yeah, like the mayor said, we have victim services within our police department. You can get those right through the homicide unit.
Oh, they're here.
They are.
Yeah, they're in the back, right there.
Okay, she's actually back there in the red, see her in the red top? She's our victim services, but right here, the gentleman that just stood up, he is the captain of the homicide unit. He can get your mom's information, and he will have the detectives call you because they should be following up periodically. And I'm sorry for the loss, your family's loss, but they can follow up and tell you right where we are with the investigation.
And I will also say, just so that you know, that it wasn't always the case that like gunshot victims and things like that got the victim services. So that is something that I started like a year ago, and we're it's unfortunate that we have to do it, but we know that it's much needed.
Is your mom part of, it's a group Mothers Against Murdered Sons? Yeah. Is she part of that? Chardell, who is back, I don't know where she went this time, but she's over there. She can help you out because there's a whole group that comes together that have all experienced the same loss to help each other cope with the loss.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioner.
Good evening, ma'am.
My name is Joyce Butler, and my question is directed to the mayor. I am here because at your meeting, at the Shake and Bake in Zone 21217. The other day you made a statement, and I'll repeat it. You said, "We in West Baltimore chill." My question is there more of a need to chill in 21217 than any other zone in Baltimore City? And what did you mean by that statement?
So I think that gentleman that was speaking in a way where he was being disrespectful to everyone else, he was doing it in a way that was disrespectful. And anywhere in the city, you have to be respectful. But I'm for sure not going to take that kind of disrespect in an area of streets where I had to walk growing up. And I think as we've been here tonight and everyone's been respectful, we were asking that gentleman to do the same thing, period. Councilman?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Commissioner.
Good evening, sir.
I didn't come here to ask a question. I came to give a more so like a comment. I knew these two gentlemen when I was a city councilman in the 13th district. Brandon Scott was the councilman in the 2nd, and Rich and Commissioner was at Northeast. And the work that they did up there in that Northeast, a lot of people don't see. I remember the tracks. That's why I don't believe that we should go outside of the city of Baltimore to look for a commissioner, especially when we have officers here that start from the rank and file. They should be able to move all the way up to commissioner. And I've always stood on that, with my opinion. What the years that we were in there, I was the council chairman for public safety. Brandon Scott was the deputy for public safety. You had Nick Mosby on that committee also, who was a member. Sharon Middleton and Cole, he was a member of that committee. And those 4 years, I think the homicide level had dropped from 191, it went to 211 and then to 214. They were all instrumental in making that happen. That was one of the, I'm sorry.
You got, wrap it up, Councilman. We got a few more
Well,
folks behind you.
I just want people to acknowledge and know what you all have done. So I know why Rich was probably one of the ones selected. It was 3 other ones. 2 of them made it. One of them made it. One of them, Darrell D'Souza, for political reasons with the Republican Party, was removed. He should have been there. But Rich, we had meetings, we did stuff for the people in that community never heard of before.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for being here. I'm from Morrill Park. I don't mean this as an attack towards you, but what you were telling her answer as far as what you're going to do is very vague, and I just don't think it was good enough. It's kind of what we've always been told is we're working on it, but we've been working on it for years and nothing's happened with all the problems we have. This one's directed towards you, Mr. Mayor. There's plenty of black residents that live in our neighborhood as well, and you talk a lot about building equity for black residents. This is great. I totally agree with that. So I'm just wondering what is so equitable about letting drug addicts shoot up right next to people's houses, in front of their houses, on their steps, because this happens on a daily basis. And when we call the police, they usually don't come. And when I talk to the police, I say, hey, can you enforce this? They're shooting up in public. They say, no, we can't enforce shooting up in public when they're literally sticking the needles in their arms on our steps. Why are the officers telling us that?
They can enforce it, and there is a reason that I was vague, is because of, I can't get into all the specifics about the investigations, but that's part of the reason why. But we can address those things. In the past, a couple years ago, we couldn't address low-level drug offenses. Now we can. We can address it through citation and arrest if necessary. So if they're coming and they're not handling the call to your liking, the way you like it, call 911, ask for a supervisor, tell them you want to speak to the supervisor. They'll come to your house or call you and make a complaint, and then they can follow the complaint up through the blue team process with internal affairs.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Chris Danielson, and I am a member of the National Federation of the Blind. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioner Worley, for coming tonight, and we're glad to welcome you. I hope that what I have to say won't be taken amiss. I know that people are raising some very serious life and death issues tonight, and mine is not a life and death issue. So I want to respect that other people have, and the department has, a lot of very serious things to deal with. But that said, as our president mentioned, we are a civil rights organization of blind people. Maryland has a white cane law that is intended to protect blind people and other people with disabilities from discrimination. Violations of that law, such as, for example, refusing to admit someone with a guide dog or a white cane to a public place, are punishable as misdemeanors. In the past, when we have contacted police, they have been reluctant. Either they didn't know that the white cane law was enforceable in that way, or even when we told them, they were reluctant to issue a citation. I would like to know if, and you don't have to answer tonight, you're welcome to follow up with us, but I would like to have a dialogue with you, Commissioner Worley, about better enforcement of the rights of the white cane law and also other things that concern the rights of Baltimoreans with disabilities. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And there's a gentleman that works at the Federation that graduated from high school with me. He knows how to get a hold of me very quickly if you need me to tag in.
And I'm not sure if you're aware, but one of our officers who was shot many years ago and blinded is one of our instructors at the academy. He went back and got his law degree, and he's an instructor at the academy.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Gene Cassidy.
Ms. Jones?
Good evening. I just had one question, but I just wanted to go in real fast. My brother Tyrone West was brutally murdered on July the 18th, beat to death by Baltimore City police officers and one Morgan State University officer. And the scene must have been tragic. Like, I'm talking about unarmed, beat to death. And before, the first two killers, Ruiz and Chapman, are repeat violent offenders. They literally almost killed Darrell Harris 24 hours before. And it's just really sad, and I had to actually go into my pocketbook because the medical examiner's office was responsible as well for covering up my brother's brutal, horrible murder in broad daylight. Videotapes were snatched from people that had them, everything. Helicopter footage, we never obtained anything. But as horrific as it was, my brother's brutal murder, the cover-up is far worse. And that's why at every town hall meeting I'm here. You know, I just left having my car tires slashed, coming from work, learning that one of my students were murdered, like a baby, a kindergarten, murdered by his dad. Tragic incident. So everything is heavy on my heart. But the only question that I want to ask tonight, because I remember, Worley, you said that you were at the scene. You said you don't remember if you arrived 1 hour later, minutes later, you don't remember. And a lot of you guys are not going to recall. That's the known word, and I'm not saying that's your issue. But I just wanted to know, how was that scene? A scene where one black unarmed man was pepper sprayed, tased, and a 350-pound man, David Lewis from Morgan State University, sat on my dying brother's neck till he was dead, screaming, "Trayvon Martin, help." So what was that scene like for you?
The scene was quite horrific. Anytime you go to a scene and someone dies, it's horrific. When we went there and there was the incident between your brother and the officers extended a very long period, very long distance, almost several blocks. And it was investigated by, I can only say, and I'm sorry for your loss, I can only say it was an independent investigation that was done by the state's attorney and our internal affairs. And they were not charged with anything through the state's attorney, and internal affairs said that there was no charges. So we can only go by the investigations that were done at that time.
Hello, my name is Angela Zanti. I'm Morrill Park again. I'm the Neighborhood Association president, and I'd like to invite both of you anytime, second Tuesday of the month, to
Still
our
at the rec center?
meetings. Yes, still
All right,
at the
cool.
rec center. I also would like to thank the Guardian Angels. They have really been helping our community out. Thank yous both for doing this. I also would like to ask the question, with the petty crime laws being enforced stronger, are there any procedures of making sure that the police now know that the petty crime laws are going to be enforced? Like, is there any type of, meeting, or how do you get it through to your officers that there will be enforcement and citations for those petty crimes?
Yeah, there's a whole set of policies that are directed towards low-level offenses, the quality of life issues. There's a roadmap basically drawn out, a verbal warning. Then you get a written citation, then it goes to arrest. We're hoping that most of the time a verbal warning will abate it. And since the state's attorney has brought back the citation docket, that's what's happened. When we give a verbal warning, it usually abates the problem. We have not written that many citations because we haven't had to, because they've taken the warning. But we do, as we get more and more used to it, they'll start using it a little bit more, because eventually people will stop listening to the warning and we'll have to use citations.
And Commissioner, can you talk about how you guys have the ability to send power blast to everyone about policy change?
Yeah, we have it's called Power DMS. We put it on our data system. You have to sign in, you have to take a test if there's a test applied, but it gives you the outline of the policy. You have to read the policy and then you have to sign for it. We did that years ago when we first started doing when we changed our low-level enforcement policy. And then when we restarted the program under State's Attorney Bates, we did it again so that they had to sign for it to give them a refresher. And there's roll call training every night in some districts that tell them what they can and can't enforce, what to enforce by citation, and hopefully we can abate them by having somebody just being told that they can't do something. But we do have other steps now that we didn't have a couple years ago.
Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
And we will see you at the meeting.
Thank you.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Liz Simon Higgs, and I live just up the street here in Riverside. I'm wondering, to your knowledge, are there any barriers for local control to be fully implemented here in Baltimore, since every other jurisdiction in the state is able to have its local council, make broad legislative policies for the department? And do you support that?
So I guess that's the me question, and the answer, quite frankly, is yes or no. I'm not someone that likes to toot my own horn, but the councilman attests that really no one knew that BPD wasn't a local agency until I brought it up when I tried to introduce my first piece of legislation as a council member. So we are going through that process. It took us a long time to get the state to pass that. There's one more thing that has to happen. There'll be now local legislation that you have to now take stuff that was in Code of Public Law, which is public local law, which is state law, but only for Baltimore City. Move that over to our local code and charter. And I know that we've been working with the council president and the chairman and some other folks around that, and we will go from there. There will still be, however, I think I always say this when we talk about local control, not just in Baltimore, but across the state of Maryland, there will still be some policing, public safety things that can only be done at the state level, and everything else will be handled at the local level like it is for everyone else. So, for example, redistricting would have probably happened 20, 30 years ago if we had local control. Police redistricting was a flag that every single city council person that represented Northeast Baltimore, from Martin O'Malley to me, took up, right? Because it was so inequitable, and we couldn't do it here locally. The same things around, and also it's very important for the consent decree. We're not going to get out of a consent decree until all of these things in the decree are put into law, right? We have to make sure that those laws are put in, and we need to put them in locally, and we look forward to working with everyone to make that happen.
And
so it's almost done. So it's almost done. The state passed the bill last year. There was a commission, a group, and then there'll be some other stuff, and then there'll be something again that you guys have to vote on to go in the charter when the election comes up in November of '24.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Commissioner. My name is Dee Gotsia. I am a Baltimore City native. I'm praying that this is a bright spot in this meeting. This is nothing negative. You have within your ranks, Mr. Commissioner, a resource that can bring back one of the programs that I just heard you speak about, working with young children. Myself and my colleagues have worked with this resource using this program, which is now defunct. It was known as PAL. This is my statement to you. This resource is vast. She has an army of people that can stand behind her to help her if you want to bring it back. However, this person is in need. I will not go into details. I would just like 1 minute of your time after this meeting. Thank you, sir.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And last but not least, ma'am.
Yes, sir. My name's Lindsay Kuiper. I'm a 20-year city resident currently living in Canton. I specifically had a question about the use of district action teams. So my understanding is that the sort of remit of the district action teams is to, go out into the community and to look for things like, people with characteristics of armed persons and things like that, so that they can try to make arrests and get guns off the street. The question that I have is, that seems to be exactly the same as the remit of previous, violence reduction squads like GTTF and VCID. So my question specifically is, what is the police department doing to safeguard and make sure that those units aren't turning into these same sort of cowboy squads that have the high levels of misconduct and contribute to the community mistrust of the police that are working in those communities.
Yes, ma'am. And that is some of their function. Their function is also to investigate the drug complaints. When we get complaints, they do investigations on the drug crews. So that's part of their issue. We've changed those fundamentally from the fact that they wear a design uniform. They'll have a vest that identifies them clearly. They wear body-worn cameras that are looked at. All their activities are looked at. Their arrests are overseen by their sergeant. The span of control is much lower now than it's ever been. Right now, in those district action teams, there's one sergeant for about every 4 to 5 officers, which is lower than it's ever been. So you have a supervisor, and above the sergeant is a lieutenant. And then you have a captain and a major that oversees all of the activities that they do on a daily basis. And then we follow up with any complaints. Before you even get into a district action team, when we brought back our teams, like district action teams, we went through every single name. They had to have a background check. They could have a few complaints, but they had to be completed. Any discipline that they had to be completed. And if someone gets a complaint now for something that we think is egregious, we will remove them from the team and put them back into patrol.
Thank you.
There's a lot of checks and balances that we never had in the past, is kind of the easy way to say it, to make sure that those officers are adhering to the same policies as everyone else.
Thank you. And thank you very much, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you.